Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of everything crazy that is going on in today's world. We're exploring some seriously wild Reddit stories that'll make you question everything about the people around you. I've got a family business dream that became a war zone before redemption, a workplace accusation that threatened everything until the truth literally fell out, a living situation that spiraled into identity chaos, a medical nightmare where profit trumped the oath to do no harm, even a relationship that formed when it shouldn't have. I read these every day, so double check and make sure you are subscribed to get these in your YouTube feed. Hope you have your favorite snack ready. Let's jump straight in. Our first story shows that you should fight for your dreams, even when others don't believe in you. Sitting here in my apartment, looking at the bottles of my BBQ sauce lined up on the kitchen counter with their professionally printed labels, I still can't quite believe the journey that got me here. Not because it was hard, though it definitely was, but because the people who made it hardest were the ones who should have been in my corner from day one. I've always been into cooking. Growing up, I was the kid who actually wanted to help in the kitchen, who watched cooking shows for fun, who experimented with recipes until I got them right. My parents tolerated it, I guess, but they never took it seriously. In their minds, cooking was a hobby, not a career. They pushed me toward accounting because it was safe, stable, respectable. So that's what I studied, that's what I do for 45 hours a week, and I'm decent at it, I guess. But it's not my passion. About 2 years ago, I started really diving into BBQ. I got a smoker, started experimenting with rubs and sauces, spent my weekends perfecting techniques. My friends loved what I made. Every cookout, every party, people would ask me to bring my ribs or pulled pork, and they'd specifically request my sauce. I'd bottle up little jars for them, and they'd keep coming back for more. The sauce was what really clicked for me. I must have made 50 different versions, tweaking ratios, trying different ingredients, finding the balance between sweet, tangy, smoky, and spicy. I finally landed on something special, a sauce with a unique flavor profile I hadn't tasted anywhere else. It had this depth that came from using 3 different types of peppers, molasses instead of brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, and a secret ingredient I'm still not sharing publicly, a specific tea that added an earthy undertone nobody could quite identify. My friend Marcus runs a food blog and asked if he could review my sauce. He posted about it, gave it a glowing write-up, and suddenly I had strangers messaging me asking where they could buy it. That's when the idea really hit me. What if I could actually sell this? Not as my whole career, at least not right away, but as something real, something more than a hobby. I did research. I learned about cottage food laws, commercial kitchen requirements, liability insurance, all of it. I found a commercial kitchen I could rent by the hour, a shared space used by small food businesses. The costs were manageable. I'd need to invest maybe $4,000 to get started properly. Equipment, ingredients in bulk, bottles, labels, business registration, insurance, and kitchen rental for a few months. I was so excited when I sat my parents down to tell them about it. I laid out my whole plan, showed them the numbers, explained how I'd start small, test it at the local farmers market, see if there was real demand before scaling up. I wasn't asking for money. I'd saved enough. I just wanted to share this dream with them, maybe hear that they were proud of me for pursuing something I cared about. My dad's reaction still stings. He laughed. Not like a supportive chuckle, but a genuine dismissive laugh. He asked if I was serious, if I really thought I could compete in the saturated BBQ sauce market, if I understood how many food businesses fail in their first year. He said I had a good job, a stable income, and I was talking about throwing money away on a fantasy. He called it my midlife crisis at 28. My mum was worse in a way because she acted concerned instead of openly dismissive. She said she worried I'd embarrass myself, that I'd waste my savings, that people were probably just being nice about my sauce, that this was exactly the kind of impractical dreaming that had gotten my uncle into financial trouble years ago. She kept saying, I needed to be realistic, that hobbies should stay hobbies. I tried to explain that this was a side project, that I wasn't quitting my job, that the financial risk was minimal, but they weren't hearing me. My dad said if I went through with it, I shouldn't come crying to them when it failed. My mum said she hoped I'd reconsider and focus on things that actually mattered, like my career and finding a serious girlfriend to settle down with. I left their house feeling crushed. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, to listen to them, to stay safe in my accounting job and keep BBQ as just a weekend hobby. But a bigger part of me felt angry. I was a grown adult with my own money and my own life, and they were treating me like a deluded child. I decided I'd prove them wrong. I registered the business, got my insurance, booked kitchen time, and designed labels. I named it Ember and Oak BBQ Sauce, which felt right for the smoky profile. I made my first commercial batch, 50 bottles, and signed up for the Saturday Farmers Market 3 weeks out. I posted about it on social media, told all my friends, and hoped for the best. That first Farmers Market morning, I was terrified. I set up my little table with bottles displayed, sample cups, and crackers for tasting. The first hour was slow. A few people stopped, tried samples, said it was good but didn't buy. I started to hear my parents' voices in my head, their warnings, their dismissiveness. But then someone bought 2 bottles. Then someone else bought 3 and asked if I had a website. By the end of the day, I'd sold 43 of my 50 bottles. The feedback was incredible. People loved the unique flavor, the complexity, the fact that it wasn't just another generic sweet BBQ sauce. Multiple people asked if I'd be back the following week. I went home exhausted and exhilarated. I'd made back most of my kitchen rental and ingredient costs in one day. I texted my parents to tell them how it went. My dad responded with one word, nice. My mom said she was glad I had fun, but hoped I wasn't neglecting my real job. That was it. No congratulations, no acknowledgement that maybe I'd been onto something, just subtle discouragement. I kept going. I was at the farmers market every Saturday for 2 months. I sold out every single week, started making bigger batches, refined my label design, created a simple website where people could order online. Word spread. A local food Instagram account featured me. A neighborhood Facebook group shared my link. I couldn't keep up with demand. Then I got an email from a small grocery store in my neighborhood. The owner had tried my sauce at the farmer's market and wanted to carry it in his store. I met with him, negotiated terms, delivered 30 bottles that Tuesday. They sold out in 4 days. He ordered 60 more. Over the next 3 months, I got into 4 more stores, all local independent grocers. I was working my accounting job during the week, spending my evenings and weekends in the commercial kitchen, fulfilling orders, delivering to stores, managing inventory. It was exhausting, but I'd never been happier. I was building something real. My parents knew vaguely that I was still doing the sauce thing, but I'd stopped sharing details with them. Why bother when they'd just minimize it or warn me about inevitable failure? We'd talk on the phone about surface-level stuff, my job, their retirement plans, weather, anything but my business. 6 months in, I hit a milestone. I'd sold over 2,000 bottles. I'd made enough profit to cover all my startup costs, and then some. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was real income from something I built. I'd proven the concept. More importantly, I'd proven to myself that I could do this. I decided to tell my parents in person. I drove to their house on a Sunday, brought a bottle of my sauce and some of the local press I'd gotten, a feature in a neighborhood magazine, and a mention in a citywide food blog's roundup of local products to try. I showed them my sales numbers, my profit margins, the contracts with stores. I explained how I was looking into scaling up, maybe getting into bigger retailers, possibly doing online shipping nationwide. I thought they'd finally see it, that they'd admit they were wrong to discourage me, that they'd be proud. My dad looked at the numbers and said I was working way too hard for not enough money, that I'd probably make more just picking up overtime at my accounting firm. My mum said it was nice, but asked when I was going to focus on finding a wife and starting a real family instead of playing restaurant entrepreneur. That's when something shifted in me. I realized I didn't need their approval. I'd been seeking it this whole time, wanting them to acknowledge my success, to apologize for doubting me. But they were never going to give me that. Their worldview was too rigid, their definition of success too narrow. I could become a millionaire from this source, and they'd probably still ask when I was going to get serious about my accounting career. I left their house that day and decided I was done trying to prove anything to them. I'd keep building my business because I loved it, because it brought me joy, because my customers appreciated what I created. Their opinion became irrelevant. Now, a year and a half since that first farmers market, I'm in 23 stores across 3 cities. I hired someone part-time to help with production. I'm developing a second flavor. I'm in talks with a regional distributor. My accountant, the irony, did my taxes and showed me that my sauce business actually generated almost as much income as my day job last year. I'm planning to go full-time with it within the next 6 months. My parents still don't get it. They ask occasionally how my little sauce hobby is going. I give vague answers and change the subject. Maybe one day they'll understand, or maybe they won't. Either way, I'm building the life I want, doing work that fulfills me, creating something people genuinely love. That's success in my book, regardless of whether they can see it. That's the end of that story. Sometimes, the people who should champion your dreams are the ones who try to clip your wings, build anyway, succeed anyway. Your validation doesn't have to come from them. Our next story shows how quickly you can go from victim to vindicated when the truth has a way of revealing itself. I've worked at Millie's Coffee House for 2 years, and until a month ago, I genuinely loved my job. It's a small independent shop in a busy downtown area, the kind of place with regulars who come in every morning, who know our names and we know their orders. The owner, Cheryl, has always been fair. The tips are good. My co-workers were people I actually liked. Past tense on that last part for reasons that'll become clear. The coffee shop has a tip jar system where all tips get split evenly among whoever's working that shift. It's not complicated. At the end of the day, we count the jar, divide it by the number of people who worked, and everyone gets their share in cash. Most days it's between $20 and $40 per person, sometimes more on weekends. It's not life-changing money, but it adds up, and it's always felt fair. About 2 months ago, we started noticing the tip jar seemed lighter than usual. Nothing dramatic, but several of us mentioned that it felt like tips were down. We figured maybe it was seasonal, or people were tipping less, or we were just imagining it. Cheryl mentioned it casually once, said she hoped business wasn't dropping off, but nobody was particularly worried. Then, 3 weeks ago, Jade joined the team. She was new to the area, needed work, had coffee shop experience from her last city. She seemed nice enough at first. Friendly, quick learner, showed up on time. She'd only been there about a week when things went sideways. It was a Tuesday morning. I came in for my shift, and Cheryl immediately pulled me into her office. She looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for her. She said there'd been a complaint that another employee had concerns about the tip jar and that she needed to address it. I had no idea what she was talking about. She said Jade had come to her the previous evening, after a shift we'd worked together, and reported that she'd seen me pocket money from the tip jar without recording it. Jade claimed she'd witnessed it multiple times over the past week, that I'd reach into the jar when I thought nobody was looking and slip bills into my apron pocket. I was completely blindsided. I told Cheryl that absolutely had not happened, that I'd never stolen from the tip jar, that I didn't know why Jade would say that. Cheryl said she had to take all accusations seriously, that she wasn't making any decisions yet, but that she needed to investigate. She asked if I'd be willing to turn out my pockets. I did, immediately. Nothing but my phone, keys, and a few receipts. She said the accusation was specifically about prior shifts, not that day. She asked if there was any way to prove I hadn't taken money. I said we didn't have cameras, so no, there wasn't proof either way. She nodded, said she'd talk to the other employees, and that I should go ahead and start my shift, but that I'd be watched more closely for now. The way she said it made me feel like a criminal. Working that day was humiliating. I could feel everyone looking at me differently. Jade was working too, and she avoided eye contact completely. Our other co-worker Maya seemed confused and uncomfortable. I wanted to scream that I hadn't done anything wrong, but I also knew that's exactly what a guilty person would say. That evening, Cheryl called a staff meeting with everyone who'd worked over the past few weeks. She didn't name me specifically, but she addressed the tip jar concerns, said there'd been reports of theft, and that she was taking it seriously. She said if anyone had information, they should come forward. She also said that whoever was responsible had one chance to confess, and she'd be more lenient than if she had to figure it out through investigation. Nobody confessed, because I hadn't done anything. But the meeting created this awful atmosphere where everyone was suspicious of each other. After everyone else left, Jade stayed behind and told Cheryl she stood by what she'd reported, that she'd seen me do it, that she understood this was hard, but she had to be honest. I asked to speak to Cheryl privately. I told her that I'd never stolen anything in my life, that this job meant a lot to me, that I had no idea why Jade would accuse me. Cheryl said she wanted to believe me, but that Jade seemed genuinely concerned and had no apparent reason to lie. She said she'd have to reduce my shifts until this was resolved. I left feeling like my whole world was falling apart. The next few days were awful. I'd gone from working 5 shifts a week to 2. My co-workers were awkward around me. Some seemed sympathetic but unsure. Others clearly thought I was guilty. I couldn't prove my innocence, and that powerlessness was crushing. I considered quitting, but that would have looked like an admission of guilt. I was trapped. Maya, who'd been working there longer than anyone except Cheryl, pulled me aside on my next shift. She said quietly that she didn't think I'd done it, that it didn't fit with the person she knew me to be. She also said, carefully, that the tip jar had actually seemed lighter since Jade started, and that maybe Cheryl was investigating the wrong person, but without proof, it was just speculation. I started keeping detailed notes. I'd count the tip jar at the start of my shifts when possible, and note what I could, but it felt futile. I wasn't there most of the time anymore. I couldn't catch someone in the act if I wasn't working. Then, 8 days after the accusation, something almost comically perfect happened. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was working with Jade and Marcus, one of our weekend regulars who'd picked up a few shifts. We'd just finished a busy lunch rush. The tip jar was full, probably close to $150. Cheryl was in the back doing inventory. Jade said she was taking her break and headed to the back room where we keep our stuff. She was gone, maybe 5 minutes. When she came back, she was wearing her jacket, said she was cold, that the air conditioning was too high. It was weird because it was late spring and warm outside, but whatever. Marcus asked her to help him clean the espresso machine, which required bending down and reaching. As Jade leaned forward to grab something, I heard a fluttering sound. A bill had fallen out of her jacket pocket onto the floor. A $2 bill. Now, $2 bills aren't super common, but they're not unheard of. Except that earlier that day, one of our regular customers, an elderly man named Frank, had specifically made a big deal about putting a $2 bill in the tip jar. He collects them and always tips with them, and he'd joked about it being good luck. All 3 of us working that shift had noticed. It was distinctive. I looked at the $2 bill on the floor. Marcus looked at it. Jade's face went completely white. She stammered something about how she must have had it in her pocket from before, that she'd gotten it as change somewhere. But Marcus, bless him, immediately said, "Wait, isn't that the same $2 bill Frank put in the tip jar like 2 hours ago?" Jade bent down quickly to grab it, shoving it back in her pocket, but the damage was done. Marcus was already walking to get Cheryl. I just stood there, staring at Jade, feeling this surreal mix of vindication and anger. Cheryl came out, and Marcus explained what happened. Cheryl asked Jade to empty her pockets. Jade refused at first, said this was an invasion of privacy, that she didn't have to prove anything. Cheryl said she could empty her pockets or leave and not come back. Jade chose to empty them. 4 $20 bills, 3 10s, 2 5s, and the $2 bill, $122. Cheryl asked where that money came from. Jade claimed it was her own money, her tips from earlier shifts, money she'd had in her bag. But her story was falling apart as she talked, contradicting herself about which shifts, which days. Cheryl counted the tip jar right then. It had $53. She checked the receipts from that day, estimated what the tips should have been based on sales, and determined we were probably short around $70 to $80. The amount in Jade's pockets was suspiciously close to what was missing, if you added back the approximate tips that were still in the jar. Cheryl fired Jade on the spot. Jade tried to turn it around, said this was retaliation for her reporting me, that she was going to sue, that this was unjust. But her performance was weak. Everyone in the room knew what had happened. She'd been stealing from the tip jar, probably since her first week, and when she noticed others were catching on to the totals being low, she'd accused me to deflect suspicion. After Jade left, Cheryl apologized to me. She said she should have investigated more thoroughly before reducing my shifts, that she'd let one person's accusation override her judgment. She restored my full schedule immediately and gave me back pay for the shifts I'd missed. She also offered to write me a formal letter, clearing me of any wrongdoing if I ever needed it for future employment. The other staff members apologized too. Maya especially felt bad that she hadn't pushed harder on her suspicions about Jade earlier. Marcus felt like a hero for catching Jade in the act, and honestly, he kind of was. If that $2 bill hadn't fallen out at that exact moment, who knows how long this would have gone on. The weirdest part is thinking about how calculated Jade's plan was. She'd only been there 3 weeks, but she'd managed to steal probably several $100s, frame me to cover herself, and almost got away with it. If not for the very specific circumstance of a $2 bill being recent and memorable enough that we noticed, she might have succeeded in making me the scapegoat while she continued stealing. I still work at Millie's. Cheryl implemented a new system where we log tip jar totals more carefully, and she installed a camera with a view of the register area, not to spy on us, but to protect us. The whole experience was horrible while it lasted, but it taught me that sometimes the truth really does come out, and sometimes it comes out because someone gets sloppy and a $2 bill falls out of their pocket at exactly the right moment. That's the end of that story. Being falsely accused is one of the most powerless feelings in the world, but if you're innocent, hold on. The truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. Our next story tonight proves that sometimes you need to become your own investigator to uncover medical fraud. Finding out your doctor has been poisoning you for profit is a special kind of betrayal that I'm still processing months later. I should start by saying I'm generally healthy. I'm 32. I exercise regularly. I eat reasonably well. I go to the doctor for annual checkups and the occasional sinus infection. Nothing major. I'd been seeing Dr. Gupta for about 3 years. Ever since I moved to this city for work, he was fine. Professional, decent bedside manner, seemed competent. About 6 months ago, I went in for a routine physical. Everything checked out fine, blood pressure good, blood work normal. But Dr. Gupta said he wanted to be proactive about some family history I'd mentioned in my intake forms years ago. My dad has high cholesterol and my mum has thyroid issues. Dr. Gupta said that given my family history, he recommended I start taking a preventive statin for cholesterol and a low-dose thyroid medication to keep my levels optimal. I was surprised because my cholesterol numbers had been fine and I'd never had thyroid symptoms. He explained it was about prevention, catching things before they became problems, keeping me healthy long term. He used a lot of medical terms, referenced studies, sounded authoritative. I trusted him. He was the doctor. Why would I question it? He prescribed 2 medications, Lipitor for cholesterol and Synthroid for thyroid. He said, I'd probably be on them long term, that we'd monitor with blood work every few months, and that I'd likely feel fine but might have more energy and mental clarity. He sent the prescriptions to my pharmacy, and I started taking them that week. Within 2 weeks, I felt terrible. I was exhausted all the time, even after a full night's sleep. I had muscle aches, especially in my legs and back. My stomach was upset constantly. I felt foggy, like I couldn't think clearly. I figured maybe it was stress or a virus, something unrelated. By week 3, it was worse. The muscle pain was bad enough that I struggled with my normal workouts. I was nauseous most days. I started getting headaches. I felt anxious in a way I'd never experienced before. This jittery, constant worry about nothing specific. I called Dr. Gupta's office and got an appointment for the following week. When I told him about my symptoms, he didn't seem concerned. He said adjusting to new medications could take time, that side effects were often temporary, that my body needed to adapt. He did blood work to check levels and said everything looked fine, that I should give it another month. He also prescribed me something for the anxiety, Lexapro, saying it might help with the adjustment period. I wanted to trust him, so I kept taking everything. The anxiety medication made me feel even foggier. The muscle pain didn't improve. I lost weight because I couldn't stomach food. I was exhausted and miserable, but Dr. Gupta kept saying it was normal, that we'd figure it out, that sometimes it takes time to find the right medication balance. 2 months in, I was falling apart. I'd had to cut back my hours at work because I couldn't focus. My friends were worried about me. I looked sick, hollow-eyed and pale. I went back to Dr. Gupta, and this time I said I wanted to stop the medications. He strongly discouraged it, said stopping suddenly could be dangerous, that we should try adjusting dosages instead. He increased my thyroid medication and added a muscle relaxer for the pain. That's when things got really bad. Within days of the increased thyroid medication, I developed a tremor in my hands. My heart would race randomly. I couldn't sleep at all, even though I was exhausted. I felt like I was dying. I went to the emergency room because I thought I was having a heart attack. The ER doctor did a full workup and found that my thyroid hormone levels were extremely elevated, dangerously elevated. He asked what medications I was taking, and when I told him, he looked confused. He asked why I was on thyroid medication when my records showed my thyroid function had always been normal. I said my doctor had prescribed it preventively. The ER doctor was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's not how thyroid medication works. You don't take it preventively. You take it if your thyroid is underactive, and mine clearly wasn't. In fact, the medication was making me hyperthyroid, which explained all my symptoms. The tremor, the heart racing, the anxiety, the insomnia, all textbook hyperthyroidism caused by medication I didn't need. He told me to stop taking the thyroid medication immediately and to follow up with an endocrinologist, not with Dr. Gupta. He also said the statin could be causing the muscle pain and that I should discuss with a specialist whether I actually needed it given my age and cholesterol levels. I felt this horrible sinking realization sitting in that ER. Dr. Gupta had prescribed me medications I didn't need, medications that had made me sick for 3 months, and when I told him I was sick, he'd prescribed more medications instead of stopping the ones causing harm. I made an appointment with a new primary care doctor and an endocrinologist. Both were horrified when they reviewed my case. The endocrinologist said my thyroid had been completely normal, that there was no medical reason for me to be on Synthroid, and that the dosage Dr. Gupta had increased me to was recklessly high. She had me stop it immediately and said it would take weeks for my system to clear. The new primary doctor looked at my cholesterol history and said, while my numbers were slightly elevated, they weren't high enough to warrant a statin at my age, especially not without trying diet and exercise interventions first. She had me stop the Lipitor too. She also said the Lexapro had been unnecessary, that my anxiety was likely a direct result of the hyperthyroidism caused by the incorrect medication. Within 2 weeks of stopping everything Dr. Gupta prescribed, I started feeling better. The muscle pain decreased. My energy came back gradually, the anxiety faded. The brain fog lifted. By week 4, I felt like myself again. The relief was enormous, but so was the anger. I couldn't understand why Dr. Gupta had prescribed medications I didn't need. Was he just incompetent? Did he misread my charts? I wanted answers, so I requested my full medical records from his office. When I reviewed them, something jumped out at me. There were notes in my chart about my cholesterol and thyroid that didn't match what he'd told me. My levels had been normal. He'd written that he discussed the numbers with me and that I'd declined medication, but then the next entry said he'd prescribed them anyway for prevention based on family history. It didn't add up. I started researching, fell down a rabbit hole, and discovered something disturbing. There'd been news stories over the past few years about doctors receiving kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies for prescribing certain medications. It's technically illegal, but it happens through various loopholes: speaking fees, consulting arrangements, research grants, things that look legitimate but function as incentives to prescribe. I searched Dr. Gupta's name, along with pharmaceutical companies, and found he'd received payments from the manufacturers of both Lipitor and Synthroid. Public records showed he'd gotten over $40,000 in consulting fees and speaker payments from these companies over the past 3 years. I felt sick all over again. He'd prescribed me medications I didn't need, medications that had made me seriously ill, potentially because he was being paid to prescribe them. I was collateral damage in what amounted to a financial arrangement between him and pharmaceutical companies. I filed a complaint with the State Medical Board. I detailed everything: the unnecessary prescriptions, the ignored symptoms, the dangerous dosage increases, the financial connections to the drug manufacturers. I included all my medical records, the ER visit documentation, and the assessments from my new doctors. The medical board investigation took months. During that time, I learned I wasn't the only one. 3 other patients had filed similar complaints about Dr. Gupta prescribing unnecessary medications and ignoring serious side effects. The board eventually suspended his license, pending a full review. Last I heard, he's facing a formal hearing and possible permanent license revocation. I also reported him to my insurance company, which launched its own investigation into potential fraud. If they determine he was prescribing unnecessarily, they could pursue legal action for the costs of medications and treatments that weren't medically necessary. The whole experience has left me deeply distrustful of doctors in a way I hate. I know most physicians are ethical and genuinely care about their patients, but knowing that some are willing to harm people for money, that the system has enough loopholes to allow it, it's terrifying. I now question everything, get second opinions, research medications before taking them, and verify that anything prescribed is actually necessary based on my specific health data, not just general recommendations. The physical effects have resolved. I'm back to my normal health, but the psychological impact lingers. I spent 3 months feeling progressively worse, thinking something was seriously wrong with me, when the entire time it was the treatment that was the problem. The person who was supposed to help me was making me sick for profit. That betrayal runs deep. I'm sharing this because I want people to know it can happen. If your doctor prescribes medication and you start feeling worse, trust your instincts. Ask questions. Why is this necessary? What are my actual numbers? What happens if I don't take it? Get second opinions. Research your doctor's financial ties to pharmaceutical companies. It's public information. Don't let anyone make you feel like a difficult patient for advocating for your own health. Dr. Gupta might lose his license, and he should. He violated the fundamental trust between doctor and patient. He prioritized profit over my well-being, and he did it so smoothly, with such authority, that I almost didn't question it until the harm was undeniable. That's the end of that story. Medical gaslighting is real, and sometimes the person making you sick is the one who's supposed to be healing you. Trust your body. Ask questions. And never assume a white coat means someone has your best interests at heart. Our next story is about discovering betrayal in the most ordinary way possible. I never thought a grocery store receipt would destroy my life, but here we are. My girlfriend Emma and I had been together for 3 years. We met in college, moved to the city together after graduation, got a dog, the whole 9 yards. Everything felt solid. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. I was thinking about proposing sometime next year. About 4 months ago, Emma reconnected with her childhood best friend Katie on social media. They grew up together, were inseparable, until Katie's family moved across the country when they were 14. Emma was so excited when Katie posted that she was moving back to our city for work. They made plans to meet up, and I was genuinely happy for her. Emma didn't have a ton of close friends here, and I know she missed having that kind of deep, history-filled friendship. At first, it was just coffee dates every couple of weeks. Emma would come home glowing, talking about how amazing it was to reconnect, how they fell right back into their old rhythm. Katie was going through a rough breakup, so Emma wanted to be there for her. I got it. I encouraged it, actually. Told her to invite Katie over for dinner sometime. Then the frequency picked up. Coffee dates became weekly, then twice a week. Emma started going out more in the evenings, saying Katie needed company, needed to get out of her apartment, needed distraction from her ex. I understood that too. Breakups are hard, and good friends show up, but something felt slightly off. Not wrong, exactly, just different. Emma was on her phone more, smiling at texts, being vague about plans. I'm not a suspicious person by nature. I didn't snoop through her phone or demand explanations. I trusted her completely, but I did notice things. She started showering as soon as she got home from seeing Katie, every single time. She'd come home at 10 or 11 at night and immediately head to the bathroom. When I'd ask how her night was, she'd give short answers, say she was tired, that they just hung out and talked. She stopped initiating intimacy with me. And when I initiated, she always had an excuse or seemed distracted. The thing that really got my attention was the perfume. Emma had worn the same perfume for years, this light floral scent I associated completely with her. About 6 weeks ago, I noticed she started wearing something different. Something musky and heavy, not like her at all. When I mentioned it, she got defensive, said she wanted to try something new, asked why I was policing her choices. That response felt out of proportion to the question. I started paying more attention without meaning to. I noticed she was doing her hair differently on days she saw Katie, wearing makeup when she usually didn't bother for casual hangouts, choosing specific outfits. She was dressing up in a way she didn't even dress up for our date nights anymore. But every time doubt crept into my mind, I pushed it away. I felt guilty for even thinking something might be wrong. This was her childhood best friend. They were reconnecting. I was being paranoid and controlling. The discovery happened 3 weeks ago, and it was so stupidly mundane that I almost missed it. I was cleaning out Emma's car because we were planning a road trip for the weekend. She'd asked me to vacuum it and toss any trash. I found the usual stuff, empty water bottles, old receipts, a sweater in the back seat. I was gathering up the receipts to throw away when one caught my eye. It was from a grocery store across town, nowhere near where either of us usually shopped. The date was from 2 weeks prior, a Thursday evening when Emma had been out with Katie. The items were what made me stop. A bottle of wine, strawberries, whipped cream, condoms, and breath mints. My brain did this weird stutter. I stood there in the driveway, holding this receipt, trying to make it make sense. Emma and I didn't use condoms. She had an IUD. We'd been fluid bonded for over 2 years. These weren't for us. The strawberries and whipped cream felt intimate, romantic even. The wine was a $40 bottle, nicer than what we usually bought. And the location, that grocery store was in Katie's neighborhood. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Emma bought them for Katie, some kind of care package to help her get back out there after her breakup. Maybe Katie was in the car and they stopped together. But Emma had specifically told me she'd been at Katie's apartment that night, watching movies. Why would they need to go to the grocery store? And why would Emma buy romantic items and condoms for her friend? I sat in the car for 20 minutes, just staring at this receipt. Part of me wanted to throw it away and forget I ever saw it, but I couldn't. I took a picture of it with my phone and put the original back where I found it. The next few days were torture. I watched Emma differently, looking for signs I'd missed. She went out with Katie twice that week, same patterns. Long shower immediately upon returning, vague details about their evening, quick to go to bed. I felt like I was losing my mind. I started questioning everything. Was I crazy? Was I making something out of nothing? I decided to do something I'd never done before. The following Thursday, when Emma said she was going to Katie's place for dinner, I told her to have fun, kissed her goodbye like normal. Then I waited 30 minutes and drove to Katie's neighborhood. I felt sick doing it, like I was violating Emma's privacy, becoming the paranoid boyfriend I never wanted to be. But I needed to know. Katie's apartment building was easy to find from the address Emma had mentioned before. I parked down the street where I could see the entrance. Emma's car was there in the parking lot. Okay, so she was where she said she'd be. I felt a wave of relief mixed with shame. I was about to leave when I saw movement at a ground floor window. The curtains were partially open, and I could see into what looked like a living room. Emma and Katie were there, but they weren't watching a movie or talking. They were kissing, not a friendly peck, a deep, passionate kiss. Emma's hand was in Katie's hair, Katie's hands on Emma's waist, pulling her closer. I watched Emma smile against Katie's mouth, watched Katie whisper something that made Emma laugh. That specific laugh she used to do with me when we were in bed together. I sat there frozen, unable to look away. They moved to the couch, and I saw Emma straddle Katie's lap, watched them fall into each other like they'd done this 100 times before. The ease of it, the familiarity, it meant this wasn't new. This had been happening, probably since they reconnected, maybe the whole 4 months. I drove home in a daze. The whole way, my brain kept trying to rewrite what I'd seen, find alternative explanations. But there weren't any. Emma was cheating on me, with Katie, with a woman, with her childhood best friend. Every piece clicked into place. The showers, the new perfume, probably Katie's perfume, the defensiveness, the emotional distance, the receipt with condoms that made sense now for a different reason. When Emma came home 2 hours later, I was sitting in the living room with the lights off. She jumped when she saw me, laughed nervously, asked why I was sitting in the dark like a creep. I turned on the lamp and asked her how Katie was doing. She said fine, that they'd watched a movie and talked. I asked which movie. She hesitated for just a second before naming something. I pulled out my phone, showed her the screenshot of the receipt. The color drained from her face. She tried to laugh it off, said Katie. Asked her to pick those things up for a date Katie had planned. I asked why she lied about being at Katie's apartment all evening, when they clearly went to the grocery store. She stumbled through an answer. Then I told her I knew. I'd seen them together through the window. I described what I'd watched, and her face crumpled. What followed was 5 hours of crying, confessions, and justifications that made me feel even worse. Emma admitted they'd been sleeping together since the second week after Katie moved back. She said she never meant for it to happen. That old feelings resurfaced, that she'd had a crush on Katie when they were teenagers that she'd buried. She said Katie initiated it, but Emma didn't stop it. She said she loved me, but that this was different, something she needed to explore, that she'd been confused about her sexuality for years. I asked if she was planning to tell me. She said she didn't know. She said she thought it might run its course, that she could figure it out without hurting me. She actually said that, like I wasn't already devastated. She cried and said she never wanted to hurt me, that she thought she could have both, that she panicked every time she thought about choosing. I asked about the condoms, specifically, because I needed to understand the full scope. She got quiet, then admitted they'd been careful at first, but had stopped using protection about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Meaning she'd been intimate with me and Katie during the same time period without protection. I felt sick. I asked her to leave. She begged me to let her stay, to work through it, said she'd cut contact with Katie, that she'd do anything. But I couldn't even look at her. I told her to pack a bag and go to Katie's since that's clearly where she wanted to be. She left sobbing. The next few days were a blur. I called out of work. I barely ate. I told my best friend what happened, and he came over, let me vent, helped me start thinking, practically. Emma texted constantly, apologizing, begging to talk, saying she made a mistake. Katie texted me too, a long message about how sorry she was, how she never meant to come between us, how it just happened. I blocked them both. 2 weeks later, Emma came by when I was at work and got the rest of her stuff. She left her key and a letter that I still haven't read. Through mutual friends, I heard she and Katie are officially together now, posting couple photos on social media, acting like they're in some great love story. It makes me feel erased, like our 3 years meant nothing, like I was just a placeholder until her real relationship could start. The worst part isn't even the cheating. It's realizing that every time she came home from Katie's, showered off the evidence, and climbed into bed next to me, she chose to lie. Every morning, she woke up next to me and decided to keep the secret. For 4 months, I was living in a relationship that had already ended, and I had no idea. She had all the information, all the power, and I was just there, trusting her, planning a future that she'd already decided didn't exist. I'm working through it with a therapist now. Some days are better than others. I got tested for everything, thankfully all negative. I've started going to the gym more, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. I adopted another dog, a puppy that needs constant attention and keeps me from spiraling. I'm trying to rebuild my life and trust in my own judgment, because right now, I don't trust anything. People keep telling me I'm better off, that I dodged a bullet, that she showed her true colours. Maybe that's all true. But it doesn't make it hurt less. I loved her. I thought she loved me. And she did, probably, in her way. But not enough. Not more than the thrill of something new. Not more than the fantasy of a childhood connection. Not enough, to be honest, even when it would have hurt less than this. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the evidence of betrayal is hiding in plain sight, and sometimes it's literally just a grocery receipt in a dirty car. Trust your instincts, but also know that when someone wants to deceive you, they'll find a way to make you doubt those instincts. Our next story is about someone who learned that revenge is a dish best served with strategic patience. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd dedicate months to methodically destroying someone's athletic career, but here we are. This whole thing started during my junior year at a mid-sized state university where I was on the track and field team. Specifically, I was a distance runner, competing in the 5,000 and 10,000 metre events. I wasn't going to the Olympics or anything, but I was solid, consistently placed in the top 3 at conference meets, had decent times, and genuinely loved the sport. Then there was Marcus. Marcus was our team's golden boy, a 400-metre hurdler with legitimate professional potential. Scouts came to watch him. He had sponsorship interest. The coaching staff basically worshipped the ground he walked on. And for reasons I still don't entirely understand, Marcus decided that I was going to be his personal stress relief punching bag. It started small. Comments in the locker room about how distance running wasn't real athletics, just jogging in circles for people who couldn't sprint. Whatever, typical track team banter between event groups. But then it escalated. He'd accidentally knock my water bottle over during practice. He'd turn up the music when I was trying to focus before intervals. He'd make loud comments about my stride form, my race times, my body composition, anything he could target. The coaches never stopped it. When I brought it up once to our assistant coach, he basically laughed it off and said, that's just how Marcus was, that he was under a lot of pressure with his times, that I should develop thicker skin. The message was clear. Marcus was valuable. I was expendable. The breaking point came during winter training. We were doing indoor workouts, and I was on the track trying to hit some pace work. Marcus and two of his sprinter buddies decided it would be hilarious to run alongside me for a lap, mocking my pace, making exaggerated slow-motion movements, laughing the entire time. They were loud enough that the entire team could hear. I could see other distance runners looking uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. The coaches were at the other end of the facility. Something snapped in me that day, not into rage, but into cold calculation. I realized that trying to go through official channels was pointless. Marcus was protected, but I also realized something else. Marcus was incredibly superstitious and ritualistic about his training and competition. He had specific warm-up routines, specific foods he ate before races, specific visualization practices. His success wasn't just physical talent, it was psychological confidence built on rigid patterns. I started small. Marcus always put his gym bag in the same locker, number 47. I started showing up early and moving it to random other lockers. Not stealing anything, just moving it. He'd waste 10, 15 minutes searching for it, throwing off his pre-practice routine. He'd be agitated and unfocused. He always ate the same pre-race meal, grilled chicken, white rice, steamed broccoli, 48 hours before every meet, like clockwork. I became friendly with the dining hall staff, learned when he typically ate, started sitting near his usual table. I'd mention, casually, to whoever I was eating with, about how I'd read that white rice could cause blood sugar spikes that tanked performance, or how some study suggested steamed vegetables reduced testosterone. Loud enough for him to overhear. Planting seeds of doubt. Marcus had a lucky pair of running socks. Bright orange, he wore them for every competition. I never touched them, but I made sure he saw me looking at them in the locker room, made comments about how wild it was that some athletes were so dependent on superstitions, how psychological dependency on objects was basically admitting mental weakness. Watched the paranoia grow in his eyes. The beautiful thing about psychological warfare is that it's invisible. Nobody could prove I was doing anything wrong. I was just a teammate making conversation, sharing interesting articles, being present in shared spaces. But Marcus started unraveling. His times in practice got inconsistent. He'd show up to workouts already stressed, already in his own head. I also became the most supportive teammate imaginable to everyone else. I helped younger runners with their training plans. I volunteered to pace people during their workouts. I organized team dinners, built social capital. So when Marcus started complaining that something felt off, that he felt like someone was messing with his routine, people thought he was being paranoid or making excuses for his declining performance. The conference championship meet came in late March. Marcus was seeded first in the 400-meter hurdles. He'd been struggling in the weeks leading up to it, but everyone assumed he'd pull it together when it mattered. The coaches kept telling him it was just a mental block, that he needed to trust his training. I made sure to be around during his warm-up. Asked him, very sincerely, if he'd seen the article about athletes who peaked too early in their college careers and never recovered their form. Mentioned how sports psychologists said that once doubt entered an athlete's mind, it was almost impossible to remove. Told him I was sure he'd be fine, but man, it must be tough feeling off right before the biggest meet of the season. He ran terribly, clipped 2 hurdles, finished 6th, didn't qualify for regionals. Afterwards, he completely melted down, screaming at coaches, claiming something was wrong, that he didn't feel like himself. The coaches were baffled. His parents were there, mortified. Scouts who'd come to watch left early. His senior year was worse. The confidence never came back. He'd developed such anxiety about competition that he'd throw up before races. His times regressed significantly. The sponsorship interest evaporated. He finished his college career as a shell of what he'd been. I never told anyone what I'd done. I graduated, moved on with my life, kept running recreationally. A few years later, I saw on social media that Marcus was working some normal office job, no longer competing. Part of me felt guilty. A smaller part felt satisfied. Mostly, I just felt tired. The thing about revenge is that it doesn't actually fix anything. Marcus was terrible to me, and I systematically destroyed something he loved. We both lost something. The only difference is that I chose my loss. He had his taken from him. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the people who wrong us face consequences, but creating those consequences can change us in ways we don't expect. This next one involves a choice between loyalty and doing what's right. I've been working as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized distribution company for about 3 years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays decently, and the work is straightforward. We manage inventory, coordinate shipments, keep everything moving. Part of the job involves occasional use of company vehicles for supply runs, vendor meetings, that sort of thing. About 8 months ago, I started noticing something odd with my co-worker Derek. We'd been hired around the same time, worked in adjacent roles, had a friendly professional relationship. Nothing deep, but we'd grab coffee sometimes, complain about management, normal co-worker stuff. Derek had been assigned one of the company trucks more regularly, because his role involved more frequent vendor site visits. One morning, I came in early to grab some files I'd forgotten, and I saw Derek pulling into the parking lot in the company truck at 7:15 in the morning. Weird, because we didn't start until 8:30, and there shouldn't have been any vendor visits scheduled that early. I didn't think much of it initially. Maybe he'd picked something up, but then I saw him doing it again a few days later. And again. Always between 7 and 7:30 in the morning, always in the company truck. He'd park it, switch to his personal car, and then clock in at the normal time. A few weeks later, Derek approached me, looking stressed. We were in the break room alone, and he asked if I could do him a favor. He needed me to sign off on a vehicle log, saying that the company truck had been in the lot overnight on a specific date. He explained that he'd accidentally taken it home a few times, forgot to log it properly, and now accounting was asking questions about mileage discrepancies. He just needed me to verify that the truck had been there, save him from a paperwork nightmare. The way he framed it, it sounded like a simple clerical error. We all make mistakes, right? And Derek seemed genuinely anxious about it. I hesitated, but he kept emphasizing how it was just a formality, how the truck was always back by morning anyway, how accounting was being unreasonably nitpicky. Against my better judgment, I signed the form, told myself it was just helping out a co-worker with administrative nonsense. 2 weeks later, our supervisor Janet called me into her office along with someone from HR. They had the vehicle logs, GPS data from the trucks, and gas receipts. They wanted to know if I'd actually verified that the truck was in the lot on the dates I'd signed off on. My stomach dropped. I tried to explain that Derek had told me it was a clerical issue, but as Janet pulled up the GPS data on her computer, the reality became clear. Derek had been using the company truck for a side business. He was running a moving service on the side, using our truck, our gas, our insurance. The GPS showed the truck at residential addresses all over the city, sometimes for hours at a time. The mileage was off by thousands of miles. But that wasn't even the worst part. One of the moves he'd done resulted in property damage. He'd backed the truck into someone's garage door, causing about $3,000 in damage. The homeowner had filed a claim, assuming it was a legitimate company operation. Our insurance was now involved. There was potential liability for the company. By signing that vehicle log, I'd potentially made myself complicit in what was essentially theft of company resources and insurance fraud. HR made it very clear that this was serious. The company was considering whether to file criminal charges against Derek. They needed to know the extent of my involvement. I told them everything, that Derek had asked me to sign off, that I'd believed it was a simple paperwork fix, that I had no knowledge of the side business. I showed them texts where he'd asked me to cover, showing that he'd framed it as a minor error. I cooperated completely. The investigation took about 3 weeks. They pulled all the vehicle logs, interviewed other employees, checked financial records. Turned out Derek had been running this operation for over a year. He'd made thousands of dollars using company resources. Multiple employees had seen the truck at odd locations, but hadn't reported it because Derek always had explanations. The company terminated Derek immediately. They filed a police report for theft and fraud. Last I heard, he was facing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit from the company to recover damages and lost resources. The homeowner whose garage got damaged was also pursuing legal action. As for me, I received a formal written warning that would stay in my file for 2 years. HR made it clear that I should have reported the irregularity immediately rather than signing off on something I hadn't actually verified. They accepted that I'd been manipulated, but I'd still violated company policy. The warning meant I wasn't eligible for the promotion I'd been working toward. It meant every manager in the building knew what had happened. It meant working in an environment where people questioned my judgment. Derek never apologized. In fact, he tried to blame me in his statement to HR, claiming I'd known about the side business all along and had been helping him cover it up. Fortunately, the evidence didn't support that, but it showed me exactly who he was. The whole experience taught me that loyalty to co-workers doesn't mean enabling unethical behavior. That when someone asks you to bend the rules, even for seemingly small things, you need to ask yourself what you're really signing on for. Derek put his financial gain above everything else, and he was perfectly willing to drag me down with him when it all collapsed. I still work at the same company. The warning will come off my file eventually, and I've rebuilt trust through consistent performance. But I'm a lot more cautious now about who I help and what I'm willing to overlook. Sometimes, being a good coworker means saying no. That's the end of that story. Trust is easy to give, but extremely difficult to rebuild once it's broken. Our next story is about discovering that workplace boundaries exist for very good reasons. I started working as a marketing associate at a tech startup about 2 years ago. It was my first real job after college, and I was excited about the opportunity. The company culture was casual, everyone was young, and my boss Ryan seemed great. He was in his late 30s, charismatic, funny, and genuinely good at his job. He'd give feedback that was constructive, he'd celebrate team wins, and he made the work environment feel collaborative rather than hierarchical. About 4 months in, I started noticing that Ryan's communication style with me was slightly different than with other team members. Nothing dramatic, just little things. He'd compliment my outfits more frequently. During team meetings, he'd make eye contact with me when delivering jokes. He'd sometimes send me articles or memes late at night about work-related topics, always with a casual tone. The thing is, it was all so ambiguous. Nothing was explicitly inappropriate. He never said anything overtly sexual or romantic. It was just this constant low-level attention that felt like it might be flirting but could also just be friendly mentorship. I'd find myself analysing every interaction, wondering if I was reading too much into it or not enough into it. He'd say things like how great it was to work with someone who understood his sense of humour, or how rare it was to find team members who were both competent and fun to be around. He'd touch my shoulder briefly when walking past my desk. He'd invite me to grab coffee to discuss projects, just the two of us. Always professional enough that reporting it would seem ridiculous, but personal enough that it felt significant. I never saw a wedding ring, and I'd never heard him mention a wife or girlfriend. I assumed he was single. In my mind, I started constructing this narrative where maybe something could develop after I'd been there longer, once the power dynamic was less pronounced. I felt guilty about it, but I also couldn't deny that I was attracted to him. He was smart, successful, attentive. It felt flattering to receive that kind of attention from someone I respected professionally. The illusion shattered during a company happy hour about 10 months into my employment. We were at a bar downtown. The whole team, plus some people from other departments. Ryan was there, drinking and socializing. At one point, someone from accounting mentioned meeting Ryan's wife at a previous company event, asking how she was doing. My brain just stopped. Wife? He had a wife. I felt like an idiot. Of course he had a wife. He was 38 years old, successful, attractive. Why had I assumed otherwise? Because he never mentioned her? Because he didn't wear a ring? I started paying closer attention after that. I looked him up on social media, which I'd never done before. His accounts were private, but I found his wife's profile. She was beautiful, accomplished, worked in finance. Photos of them together at various events, looking happy. They'd been married for 6 years. The flirtatious behavior suddenly felt completely different. It wasn't potentially developing into something mutual. It was a married man playing games with someone young enough to be flattered by the attention. I felt sick. But then I noticed something else. Ryan's attention toward me didn't decrease after that happy hour. If anything, it intensified. More late-night messages. More private coffee meetings. More comments about how much he enjoyed working with me specifically. Knowing he was married made it impossible to pretend it was innocent. The breaking point came during a conference our team attended in another city. We were there for 3 days, multiple sessions each day, networking events in the evenings. On the second night, most of the team was exhausted and turned in early. Ryan suggested we check out a hotel bar, just to unwind and discuss some strategy ideas. We sat in a corner booth, had a few drinks, talked about work. Then the conversation shifted. He started asking about my personal life, my dating situation, whether I'd met anyone interesting since moving to the city. The questions felt probing, inappropriate. Then he said something about how he wished he'd met me 10 years ago, before his life got complicated. I made an excuse about being tired and went back to my room, spent the rest of the night unable to sleep, replaying every interaction we'd had, feeling manipulated and stupid. When we got back from the conference, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages that could be interpreted as inappropriate, dates and times of private meetings, witnesses to comments he'd made. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I wanted a record. Then, about 6 weeks after the conference, something shifted in the office dynamic. There was a new woman in the office, Claire, who'd been hired for the sales team. She sat a few rows over from me. I started noticing Ryan paying a lot of attention to her. Same pattern, compliments, private meetings, special attention. One day, I stayed late to finish a report, and I saw them in the conference room with the door closed. Through the glass, I could see body language that looked intimate. Leaning close, laughing, his hand on her arm. Something clicked. This wasn't about me. This was what Ryan did. He picked young women on staff, gave them attention, made them feel special, kept everything just ambiguous enough to maintain deniability. And he was married the entire time. I didn't confront him. I didn't report him to HR. I just started looking for other jobs. I updated my resume, reached out to my network, interviewed quietly. Within 2 months, I had an offer from a larger, more established company. Better pay, better benefits, clearer organizational structure. I gave my 2 weeks' notice. Ryan seemed genuinely disappointed, asked if there was anything he could do to make me stay. I kept it professional, said I was looking for new challenges and growth opportunities. Didn't mention the real reasons. On my last day, Claire caught me in the break room. She asked if I had a moment to talk. We went outside, and she asked me directly if I'd experienced anything weird with Ryan. I told her everything. She thanked me, said she'd been feeling confused about his behavior and wasn't sure if she was imagining things. I don't know what happened after I left. I heard through the grapevine that Claire also left a few months later. Ryan is still there, still in his position, presumably still doing the same thing with whoever comes next. His wife probably has no idea, or maybe she does and has made her peace with it. The experience taught me that some people view workplace relationships as opportunities for ego gratification, that ambiguity is often intentional, and that trusting your gut about inappropriate behavior is more important than second-guessing yourself. Ryan never crossed a line dramatic enough to report, but he created an environment that made me uncomfortable, and leaving was the right choice. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the healthiest response to a toxic situation is simply removing yourself from it entirely. This next one is about what happens when you discover a relationship has been over for longer than you wanted to admit. I need to start this by acknowledging that I wasn't a great boyfriend. Megan and I had been together for almost 3 years, and somewhere around the 18-month mark, things started getting heavy. Not in a good way. We'd moved in together, which seemed like the logical next step, but instead of bringing us closer, it exposed every incompatibility we'd been ignoring. She wanted to stay in every night. I wanted to go out with friends. She was obsessively clean. I was casual about mess. She wanted constant communication throughout the day. I needed space. We fought about everything. What to watch on TV, how to load the dishwasher, whose turn it was to buy groceries, the kind of stupid, grinding arguments that wear down your soul. The physical relationship had basically died. We'd have sex maybe once a week at most, and it felt obligatory rather than passionate. We'd stopped doing things together that we used to enjoy. We existed in parallel in the same apartment, increasingly resentful of each other. But we stayed together. I think because breaking up felt like admitting failure, like throwing away all the time we'd already invested. Plus, our lives were tangled together. Shared lease, shared friend group, shared routines. Unraveling all of that seemed exhausting. Then I had a work trip to Portland. I'm in software sales, and we were attending a tech conference for 4 days. I was actually relieved to get away. The morning I left, Megan and I had gotten into another stupid fight about something I can't even remember now. I drove to the airport feeling frustrated and trapped. The conference itself was fine. Standard industry stuff, presentations and networking events. But on the first evening, I went to a mixer at a rooftop bar where vendors and attendees were mingling. That's where I met Lauren. She worked for one of the companies exhibiting at the conference, did marketing for a cloud infrastructure firm. We started talking about the industry, then about Portland, then about everything else. She was funny and easy to talk to. She was also objectively beautiful. Athletic build, bright smile, confident in a way that felt natural rather than performative. We ended up talking for 3 hours. Not flirting exactly, just genuinely connecting. She mentioned she was recently single after ending a long-term relationship that had stopped working. She suggested we get dinner the next night, away from the conference crowds. I knew I shouldn't. I knew exactly what that could turn into, but I said yes anyway. Dinner turned into drinks. Drinks turned into walking around downtown. We ended up at a park overlooking the city, sitting on a bench, and we kissed. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. It was gentle and natural and felt right in a way that made me realize how wrong everything with Megan had been. We spent 3 incredible nights together, not just physically, though that was part of it. It was like we couldn't stop putting our hands on each other. And when we were finally tired enough, we talked about our lives, our careers, our hopes. She was training for a marathon. She volunteered at an animal shelter. She had goals and enthusiasm and energy that made me realize how much I'd been living in a fog of low-grade misery. On the last night, after we'd spent the evening together, she said something that stuck with me. She said that life was too short to stay in situations that had made her unhappy, that settling for okay was just slowly killing the person she could be. I flew home the next day feeling completely different. I walked into the apartment, and Megan immediately started complaining about something I'd forgotten to do before I left. I looked at her and realized I didn't want to be there. Not in that moment, not in that relationship, not in that version of my life. We broke up that weekend. It wasn't clean or easy. She accused me of cheating, which was technically accurate. I didn't tell her about Lauren specifically, but I was honest that I'd met someone who made me realize our relationship wasn't working. She was devastated and angry. Lots of crying and yelling and accusations. Moving out was complicated. We had to figure out the lease, divide possessions, untangle finances. Mutual friends had opinions about what had happened. Some people thought I was terrible for ending it this way. Others quietly admitted they'd wondered why we were still together. I didn't immediately start a relationship with Lauren. She lived in Portland. I was in Seattle. We stayed in touch, texted regularly, visited each other a few times. About 6 months after I'd left Megan, Lauren and I decided to actually date. That was 2 years ago. She moved to Seattle last year, and we've been living together for 8 months. Here's the thing. People assume the story is about cheating, about meeting someone new and leaving for them. But it's really about recognizing when something isn't working and having the courage to change it. I should have ended things with Megan long before that conference. We were both miserable, just too scared or lazy to do anything about it. Meeting Lauren wasn't the reason the relationship ended. It was the catalyst that forced me to confront reality. The relationship with Megan had been dying for over a year. We were just both too comfortable with dysfunction to admit it. I don't feel guilty about how it happened anymore. I feel guilty that I wasted Megan's time by staying in something that wasn't working. I feel guilty that I didn't have the maturity to end it honestly before things got to that point. But I don't regret leaving. Megan found someone else about a year after we split. From what I've heard through mutual friends, she's happy. I'm happy. We were just wrong for each other, and it took something dramatic to make us both acknowledge it. The experience taught me that staying in a bad relationship doesn't protect anyone. It just prolongs suffering for everyone involved. That sometimes you need something to shake you awake and show you what life could be like if you made different choices. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is admit when it's time to let go. Our final story is about watching someone you care about make destructive choices and being powerless to stop them. I've known Jason since high school. We weren't best friends back then, but we reconnected after college when we both ended up living in the same city. Over the past 5 years, he'd become one of my closest friends. We'd grab beers every week, play basketball on weekends, text constantly about everything from sports to relationship advice. He was reliable, funny, grounded, the kind of friend you assume will always be in your life. Jason worked as a project manager for a construction company. Not wealthy, but he made decent money, had a stable career path, was good at what he did. He dated occasionally, but wasn't in a serious relationship, seemed content with his life overall. About 18 months ago, Jason mentioned at one of our weekly hangouts that he'd been talking to this guy Derek about a business opportunity. It was something about financial services, helping people manage their investments and build wealth. The way Jason described it sounded vague, lots of talk about passive income and financial freedom. But he was excited about the potential. I felt alarm bells immediately. I'd heard enough stories about multi-level marketing schemes to recognize the language. I asked him directly if it was an MLM. He got defensive, said it wasn't like that this was a legitimate business model that had helped thousands of people achieve financial independence. He pulled up this slick website on his phone, showing testimonials and earnings potential. I tried to be gentle but direct, told him that those companies were almost always designed to benefit people at the top while draining money from everyone else. That the vast majority of participants lose money, that if it sounded too good to be true, it probably was. I sent him articles from reputable sources explaining how these schemes worked. Jason brushed it off, said I didn't understand the business model, that I was being closed-minded, that this was different. He'd already signed up as an associate or consultant or whatever they called it. He'd paid a $1,500 startup fee for training materials and inventory of some financial planning software packages he was supposed to sell. Over the next few weeks, Jason became completely consumed by it. He started posting constantly on social media about entrepreneurship and taking control of your financial future. He invited me to one of their opportunity presentations, which I reluctantly attended. It was exactly as awful as I expected. A hotel conference room full of people listening to some guy in an expensive suit talk about unlimited income potential and being your own boss. Everyone was aggressively enthusiastic in a way that felt cultish. I pulled Jason aside afterwards and told him straight up that this was a scam, that he needed to cut his losses and get out. He got angry with me. Said I was trying to hold him back because I was threatened by his ambition, that I was stuck in a scarcity mindset. All this language he'd clearly absorbed from their training. Things got worse. Jason started trying to recruit everyone he knew. He'd turn every casual conversation into a pitch about the business opportunity. He hosted these awkward coffee meetings where he'd try to get people to sign up under him. Most people politely declined, but a few folks from our church and friend group actually joined his downline. He was spending money constantly, attending their conferences in other cities, buying promotional materials, paying for team training events. He kept insisting he was building his business and that you had to spend money to make money. When I asked how much he'd actually earned, he got evasive, said he was still in the building phase, that income would come once his team was established. About 8 months in, the cracks really started showing. Jason had recruited maybe 6 or 7 people, but none of them were having any success selling the actual product. They were all just trying to recruit more people. Jason's credit card debt was piling up. He'd stopped contributing to his retirement account to fund his MLM activities. Worse, his relationships were deteriorating. He'd alienated most of our friend group with constant recruiting pitches. People stopped inviting him to things because they were tired of being treated as potential downline members rather than friends. At church, people actively avoided him. He'd ruined his credibility with everyone he knew. I tried having a serious conversation with him, showed him his own numbers, pointed out that he'd spent over $10,000 and made back maybe $800. Explained that this was the definition of a failing business. He accused me of being unsupportive, of not believing in him. Things came to a head at a church fundraiser dinner about 6 months ago. Jason showed up and immediately started networking, handing out business cards, trying to schedule follow-up meetings. One of the associate pastors pulled him aside and quietly asked him to stop conducting business at church events. Jason made a scene, accused the church leadership of being closed-minded and anti-entrepreneurship. It was mortifying. After that incident, Jason stopped coming to church regularly. People from his downline started contacting me and others, asking what had happened with Jason, saying he wasn't responding to their messages. Turned out, the ones who joined under him were also losing money and were angry with him for getting them involved. The final collapse came about 4 months ago. Derek, the guy who'd originally recruited Jason, apparently moved up to some regional leadership position and stopped communicating with lower-level members. Jason couldn't get support from the company, couldn't move the inventory he'd bought, couldn't recruit anyone new because he'd burned through every contact he had. He quit the MLM, but the damage was done. He was nearly $22,000 in debt. He'd destroyed friendships that had taken years to build. He'd made himself a pariah at church. His relationship with his family was strained because he'd tried to recruit them too, and they'd refused. We've started talking again recently. He reached out to apologize, admitted he'd gotten caught up in something he didn't understand, acknowledged that I'd been right all along. But things aren't the same. The trust is broken. He's working on rebuilding his financial situation, but it's going to take years. He's trying to repair relationships, but some people aren't interested in forgiving him. I feel sad more than anything. I watched someone I cared about get manipulated by a predatory business model, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. He had to learn the hard way that easy money doesn't exist, that real success takes time and work, and that sacrificing genuine relationships for financial fantasies is never worth it. Jason's working with a financial counselor now to dig out of debt. He's been going back to church, sitting in the back, trying to blend in. Some people are slowly warming up to him again. Others have moved on. He's a cautionary tale in our community now, the guy who got sucked into a pyramid scheme and lost everything. The whole experience reinforce something I already knew. When someone you care about is making bad choices, you can warn them, you can provide evidence, you can offer support. But ultimately, they have to make their own decisions. Sometimes, all you can do is be there to help pick up the pieces afterwards. That's the end of that story. True friendship sometimes means watching people make mistakes you warned them about and still being there when they finally ask for help. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe for more and comment below which one was your favorite. These stories remind us to trust our gut, and that betrayal can easily come from the people closest to us and those we're taught to trust most. Catch you tomorrow for even more stories. Take care.